Hi everybody, Drew Cook here, and wow, I thought I'd be back here a long time ago, but I got busy with Spring Thing and some other stuff. So after a long delay, it's time to get back to this Zork I playthrough. Now I don't want to rehash too much from last time, but the focus last time was really introducing the game as well as trying to explain the general discourse of parser gameplay. Parser games are really Socratic in nature. There's a dialogue going on where the game presents us, the player, we the player, with descriptive text, and we the player in turn respond with actions. And so there's this kind of back and forth between game and player. For instance, here we are in the living room, right? You are in a living room. There's a doorway to the east, a wooden door with strange Gothic lettering to the west, which appears to be nailed shut, a trophy case, and a rug lying beside an open trap door. All right. And we as players are going to look at this and look for actionable nouns, right? There's a doorway. I'm highlighting it here. We could go through. There's another wooden door with strange Gothic lettering. There's a trophy case and a rug beside an open trap door. Now, a couple of scene setting things before we go too far. One is I have cats, and the cats kind of do whatever they want. So, like, I have one of our cats on the desk right now, and she may step on the keyboard. She may horse around with the microphone. I can't control what she does. So, if she gets involved in this recording, that's just how it is, right? And we'll just keep rolling with it. The other thing is that my phone might ring. I have my phone. It's not on silent. My partner, Callie, who you may recognize that name from the art in my games. Callie does all the art. She's my collaborator and partner in all things, really. So she might call because she's off of work, in which case we'll just pause this and resume tomorrow, right? So those are just some things that could or could not happen. It's always kind of an adventure around here. But anyway, to get back to what we're talking about, we're looking for nouns. And every Infocom game back in those days came with a manual, and long ago people read manuals. And that's strange now. Video games today don't usually come with any kind of manual. They have in-game tutorials, and you're otherwise supposed to just sort of work things out. And that's perfectly fine. I don't think the market has had any trouble with that. But in those old days, people read manuals, and part of that was these games are kind of obtuse. Like, if you just kind of fired this up, would you know what to do? And the truth is, a lot of people who've heard about parser games wouldn't know what to do if they just were confronted with this screen. It's not necessarily intuitive. So people read manuals, and they explain things to each other. So let's look at, I've got a whole bunch of versions of the manual here. We'll just open one of them. There's not really a lot of backstory in this, and I showed you last time, so I don't really want to talk about the backstory, thing like that. I want to look at commands. And you can see here there's open things, take all but, all these rules about constructions. And that's kind of how you play. You go into this and you read things, and you are armed with possible nouns to use while you're playing, right? That's it. You're looking for things to do. And one kind of exhaustive way to play these games is called lawn mowing, is you can look at every one of these nouns and try to use every possible verb on each of them until something sort of by brute force is revealed to you. That's one way to play. Jason Dyer, some of you may know from All the Adventures, an excellent blog. Uh, Sometimes when things get bad, has sort of a methodical way of approaching nouns with actions, and it's very effective. I mean, I don't know anybody who can beat games the way Jason Dyer does. I'm getting a little off track here, but the point is, we're looking for nouns to apply actions, and that's a hard thing for people to get into. People still try to write tutorials for parser games, and there's a lot of focus on that, like just getting people to examine the ball, examine the rug, examine is a verb, examine rug, examine case, just kind of teaching people that kind of basic level interaction in these games. But there are two things that I think are actually harder about these games that is more, since it isn't immediate, it's not direct interaction, I think it kind of gets away from people who'd like to turn folks on to parser games. But it is very daunting. And the first part of that is geography. All right? The geography. Let's look at this, okay? This fancy looking diagram. And that is built off of, you see this, there's a doorway to the east, a wooden door to the west, trophy case, and a rug lying beside an open trap door. Okay, so these parser games are built on kind of a grid, right? And they use cardinal directions. And, that's a thing to learn. That's a kind of literacy. That's not something people just automatically, most people don't really think about the world in terms of compass directions, right? So we kind of have to adjust our thinking to engage with these game worlds. Zooming, here's the actual room they're talking about, the living room, right? And as you can see here, there's that down, which is the trapdoor beside the rug. Here's the kitchen to the east. We're not going to be taking that strange passage for a while, but the point is, the player in those days would methodically, as they enter each room, they would scour that room description for compass directions, and they would draw lines, to figure out, well, where can I go next? What is the next point in geography? And, ultimately, you have a full map of the area. And why is that important? Well, one, you can get lost, yes. But there's another very significant thing, which is sometimes the verbs involved require objects from other areas. So let's say we find a key, but the locked door somewhere else. We need a way to say, oh, well, all the way across this map, all the way over here or wherever, that's where I need to take the key so I can unlock the door, right? So there's a huge information management problem, okay, at the heart of most of these old parser games with large maps. Okay, there's the information related to just orienteering, where is this room, where am I in this space? But there's also the information management problem of what objects belong where, what do I need to take to this place or that place just to be successful, to complete my goals, to solve every problem, and, in Zork's case, that means get every treasure, right? Well, how do I get every treasure? Well, I need to know where all those things are. I need to know what's preventing me from doing what I need to do. And so that's an information management problem. If you look at all these maps, this is a big space, right? This is a really big space. And you have to have some way of keeping track of what's where so that you can act upon it. So there's a huge metagame to Zork 1 that isn't actually related to any single direct interaction with the keyboard. There's a huge metagame about managing the information, relevant to the game world and relevant to our success. And that's a little hard to relate to now because that isn't a major part of a lot of the contemporary gaming landscape today, right? And when it is, it's visual. We play something like Elden Ring, we can see, we've got compass on our top of our screen. We've got a goal tracker. We can say, well, I'm at this side of the lake and I'm just going to start running. And visually, that's all presented to us. Okay? But there's another layer of kind of interpretation, an imaginative layer, where we get these descriptions, some of them quite modest. There's not a lot here. And if we go down, let's go down, you have moved into a dark place. The trapdoor crashes shut and you hear someone barring it. It is pitch black. You are likely to be eaten by a grue. Your sword is glowing with a faint blue glow. So if we turn on our lamp, cellar. You are in a dark and damp cellar with a narrow passageway leading north and a crawlway to the south. On the west is the bottom of a steep metal ramp, which is unclimbable. That is not, that isn't a, terribly verbose or florid description of the cellar, is it? In one sense, it's really just a container for exits, right? We north, south. We have this unclimbable ramp to the west. And that's really it, right? There's the atmospheric element, which is dark and damp. But a lot of this space is really pointing us toward engaging again with the meta problem of what is this world, what is its shape, and what's in it. Things that we have to maintain and manage outside of the software program, right? So that's an important thing to understand. And contemporary interactive fiction games don't do nearly as much of this. We'll talk about some specific geographic features in Zork 1 that really didn't take off, and nobody does them today. But even in newer games, there's a lot less of this this kind of sprawling. A lot of this geography is empty. There's nothing to do in it. There's a descriptive sentence and then there's exits. It really exists to be mapped, and it's hard to really relate to that now. I mean, a lot of this game is truly kind of a walking sim. You're really just going places looking for stuff, and that is kind of hard to get, I think, today, especially with this parser thing. There's this idea of kind of unlimited freedom, and I can type anything I want. And the reality is, a huge part of the time, you're just kind of going places and making a map in Zork 1. All right? So you notice I have this map up, right? So obviously I'm not going to make you watch me map Zork 1. I've done that before. I did it once, exactly once, and I'm not going to map Zork 1 again. And really, depending on your interest in Zork 1, you may not want to map it either. I mean, the truth is, there's a lot to just kind of look at and engage with, to understand sort of the ambiance, to understand the writing craft of that time, that kind of very light but ambient description that relies on one or two very choice adjectives, right? That kind of authorial style. And you can get all that without necessarily mapping the game, just like you can get through the game without solving all the puzzles, and that may or may not be important to you. You may not care about the puzzles. However you want to engage with Zork 1, at whatever level of difficulty you prefer, there are tools in place for you to do that. This map is readily available. There are what are called invisiclues, hints that are readily available, so you can work your way through the whole thing, or you can kind of take a whirlwind tour. It's up to you. I'm more interested personally in talking to you about what playing this game is like, what it would have been like back then, and probably what is and isn't relevant today. Sticking just for a moment with I'm going to check our clock real quick. Yeah, okay. Sticking just with the map business real quick. This game goes further than just making you map an area. All right. Now that's a lot of work by itself, as you can just see by the sheer number of rooms. But another feature of Zork is extensive use of what are called non-reciprocal exits. Now, what does that mean? Well, in a typical mapping situation, let's look at the living room since we talked about it. Okay, that's the room with the rug and everything. Uh, it says that to the east is this other room, right? Through an archway is this room to the east. That's the kitchen. And there's a built-in assumption that we can return by going the opposite direction. That if we leave the living room and go east, we can return by going west. And that's what this straight line represents. And that's, a lot of people kind of see that as sort of good faith management of the map, authorial good faith. Zork goes out of its way to violate that expectation again and again. You can see here, for instance, this forest thing, where if you go east, you can go back west, but there's also this kind of nonsense where if you go north, you wind up over here. You go south, you wind up over here. Obviously, if you go south from here, you don't wind up back here. You wind up in the clearing. If you go east from the clearing and then go west, you don't go back to the clearing, you go to the forest. Okay, you see what I mean? This all kind of reaches its obnoxious fever pitch in the maze, a famously miserable bit of geography that is so baffling. It's hard to understand the map of it. So you understand what it might be to play it, right? I think this says a couple of things about Zork. One of them is just that it's really out to jerk players around, Zork 1 especially. The further we get in the trilogy, the more kind of mature, I would say, the development philosophy is. Zork 1 is part of the original mainframe Zork, and that's kind of a college, grad school, merry prankster, let's troll the guys at the other Ivy League schools, that kind of thing. And by the time we get to Zork 3, there's very little of that left. Okay, but Zork 1 is exclusively from that period. So this maze, to me, exemplifies that kind of obnoxious collegiate, snark. People who want to kind of outsmart people or top Crowther Woods adventure, right? This is a very specific point in the history of parser games reflected here. Nobody really does this anymore. Okay, this is something that really didn't go the distance as a paradigm or as a design trope. People just kind of hate it. But I think it really reflects the design commitment to mapping, how important mapping is to Zork 1. And again, that's what I've called a meta game. It's a huge game outside of the game that's required really for success. It's very hard to succeed in Zork without having a map. So again, I'm not making a map. It's here to look at. I'm going to put it in the show notes. You can review it at your leisure. This ultimately is not about mapping. It's about me telling you some things about mapping and moving on. And speaking of moving on, I think we can jump into play now. I'm using, again, Lectrot, which is Andrew Plotkin's interpreter. I like it because it automatically creates transcripts. Like if I open File, Transcript Browser, I can see a play history of everything I've done, right? And to me, that's really awesome. I always forget to make transcripts, but you can open one here, and it just shows you what you've done. And the nice thing about it is you can export that into Word as rich text, so it'll preserve things like font color and bold, which is unique at the moment among parser games. So that's just kind of my little plug for Lectrot. I think it's excellent. I have it zoomed up at a large font size for your benefit, and hopefully, if you're watching on YouTube, it's all visible. Be sure and turn your resolution settings up if it's blurry. But anyway, we're back to it. We're in this cellar. There's that ramp, and things are pretty sparse here. In a contemporary game, everything that's mentioned, you would expect at least a sentence of what's called a custom response. All right, so when we look at the ramp, we get this: there's nothing special about the chute. That is not a custom response. That's a generic response as printed anytime there isn't a custom response. So this is kind of a fallback. If they didn't write something about the chute, this is what you get. This wouldn't be, this really wouldn't fly in a contemporary game today. But you got to remember they're dealing with very small storage sizes, and they're really doing the best they can with what they have. So we don't hold Zork I accountable to contemporary craft standards. Just like we may hate the map and decide, or hate the maze and decide to skip it, but I don't really say, oh, that's a junk game because of the maze. All right, to me that's, well, this may hurt your feelings, I'm sorry, but I think that's kind of a silly thing to say. That's like saying King Lear has bad CGI. You can say that, but you're really saying something about yourself and not King Lear, right? So I hate the maze, but I would never say Zork is bad because of the maze. I think those are two different things. And the same goes with these kind of non-customized responses. But because it's an element of success, we will be examining things as we go along. Even though a lot of the time it's going to be fruitless. One general thing you probably will learn is this kind of narrow passageway leading north. That's a dead end, right? That's not going to say anything. I haven't tried this, but I just know looking at it. There's nothing special about the way. Okay, well, that's definitely a lot of nothing there. So I think what we're seeing now is we can go north and we can go south. And we don't need to look at the map for this. I'll just do whatever I want, right? I'll go north. Oh, the troll room. This is a small room with passages to the east and south and a forbidding hole leading west. Bloodstains and deep scratches, perhaps made by an axe, mar the walls. A nasty-looking troll, brandishing a bloody axe, blocks all passages out of the room. Your sword has begun to glow very brightly. This is an interesting thing, and because it's so early, it can kind of create the impression that we're playing sort of an RPG type game with a lot of combat, and that isn't true. Now, combat is very important in this game, but we're not playing, Temple of Apshai or something like that. This is by and large an adventure game about solving problems, but we do need to deal with this nasty-looking troll. There's an impressive number of sentences. We could type hit troll with sword. We could try kill troll with sword. Attack troll with sword. The troll is knocked out. Boy, that was easy. So we're gonna, the unarmed troll cannot defend himself. He dies. Almost as soon as the troll breathes his last breath, a cloud of sinister black fog envelops him, and when the fog lifts, the carcass has disappeared. Your sword is no longer glowing. Corpses don't stick around in Zork, which that's kind of become a regular thing in a lot of video games today, right? Corpses rarely stack up. They just sort of vanish. Except in Metal Gear games, I guess. The glowing sword, of course, is a Tolkien reference. I think Lebling was into fantasy. Actually, Lebling was just a voracious reader. He read a lot of sci-fi as well. What to do now? Let's look again. L for look. There's a small room with passages to the east and south and a forbidding hole leading west. Bloodstains and deep scratches, perhaps made by an axe, mar the walls. Now this is an unusually atmospheric room, isn't it? With the forbidding hole and the bloodstains, the scratches marring the walls. We could take the axe, but we're not going to. We will examine it. Nothing special about it. It's just your everyday bloody axe. There's something called an inventory limit here. I'm going to type I, which is short for inventory. carrying a sword and a brass lantern. So we are limited both in terms of the number of things we can carry as well as the overall weight of the things we carry. And so there's kind of a temptation in all these games to pick up everything and carry everything, but in practice that doesn't really work out because you're limited, and you're almost always better off leaving things where you find them. Now, there's some exceptions to that we'll talk about later on, but I mean, for the time being, especially since in theory we're making a map, right? Like if we were drawing a map, we would write right here in Troll Room, we would write Bloody Axe, so we knew where it was, and we could come back and get the axe anytime we needed it, right? But we don't need an axe right now. We don't really even need our sword right now, but we'll keep carrying it. Okay. So to the east and the south, the forbidding hole goes to the maze that we already talked about. And we will not be going into the maze for quite some time. And I'll explain my logic for that later on. We don't really need to worry about it right now, except that we're not doing it. For one thing, it's just miserable to do it. You know, I've got to get my mind in the right place to deal with that maze. But let's just explore. And again, you know, keep in mind that as a player in the 80s, we would be trying to contend or overcome, master not just the puzzles, but the geography itself. That's a core part of these games, right? I remember I mapped all of these games using graphing paper. Why graphing paper? Because, well, it helped me keep things, you know, lined up straight. And also I had it because I played Dungeons and Dragons. And I think for a lot of people playing at that time, there's kind of overlap where it's not such a stretch to understand this geography because we play Dungeons and Dragons. You know, that you know, the overlap between D&D players and computer game players. Oh, that's the phone ringing, so I guess we'll pick this up tomorrow, okay? Talk to you then.